there, everybody. Cindy Daychuk here with Queen Bee Creations. Thanks for joining me today. I promised myself if I was a little bit dressed up because I had meetings before I came into work that I would not do anything paint related, and here I am doing something paint related. I am not supposed to wear good clothes into the shop, and I'm breaking that rule. So I'm hoping that I leave paint free, but I just can't not do something. I've just built that way. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to experiment with the idea and the concept of paint inlays. Now, I don't know if you've tried these. IOD came out with a version of paint inlays where you've got a carrier sheet and it has artist grade paint on it that you embed into a wet surface, meaning wet paint, wet top coat, and that ultimately when you release it, it leaves that paint that was on the carrier sheet behind. So you can get detailed patterns onto your painted surfaces. And this is a concept, I mean, this exists in the clay world where there are pattern sheets that they can buy that already are pre-printed with slip, with colored slip or colored glazes, that sort of thing, that they can then apply, very similar to how you use IODs and remove, and it's leaving those colored patterns and images behind. And that's one of the ways that they get much more detailed patternings on plates and bowls and that sort of thing. So I kept thinking about it going, I wonder if you can make your own. So we're gonna try. I'm gonna bring you in overhead, but really I'm just experimenting. So I'm not doing a finished project. I just wanna see if it works on my surface. So I just have, I have a stack of these old, placemats. I'm going, those things under plates, placemats. And I'm going to paint it white. So it's going to take a couple of coats, but know that the final coat I'm going to be embedding our image into. So that's just happening off screen because it's just paint. It's just painting with nothing fancy. What I did do was I went into Canva because I thought whatever the design and pattern is that I'm going to be following, I want it to be something that there's no copyright on, so I don't get any issues with my video. So I just went into Canva and created this. I just took designs and moved them around, and you do you do whatever. You can freehand something, you could take wrapping paper and do a design, whatever you want to do. I don't care, I don't mind. And I have tracing paper. And with tracing paper, let me pull out a page that I have. There is a shiny side. This feels like more, here we go. There's a shiny side and a matte side. I think I should attempt this on the matte side. That's my thinking and my plan. So I am going to tape my pattern down onto the shiny side so I have matte side up that I can use to paint my design on. Okay, you're with me so far. I'm going to take you in overhead. But what I do want to do is I'm going to use a paint that does not have a built-in sealer. I want it to be open because when we go to merge it with the wet paint, I need the design paint to be able to embed itself, to merge with that, and to release from my paper. If it had a built-in top coat, it's going to anchor itself to it. It's not going to want to let go. That seems logical in my head, and so I'm going with that thinking to start. So the other thing I need to do is I am taking my clay-based paint and I am going to have to make it thinner. This is quite thick paint, right? And I need it to flow through a very thin nozzle. So it needs to get thinned down, and I'm gonna mix that up and I'm gonna put it into a little bottle like this. I got this off of Amazon. I got a big package of them that I use for various projects. I'll drop a link in for you, so don't sweat it. But I'm thinking that that's going to be the best thing. What I don't want to do though is have this to be so thin that it runs all over my paper. I need it to be thick enough that it's going to stay put. I just think this is going to be way too thick. And so I want to just thin it slightly and see how it goes. I may have to mix it, try it, clean everything out, try it a little bit again, experiment again, but I'm just doing a little bit of water at a time and trying to keep it enough so that it's going to stay put. Okay, and then we bring you in overhead and gosh, paint on my hands already. This is just going to be dangerous. All right, we'll see how it goes. Let me get this bottle loaded up and then we'll try it out. I've got my paper taped down just so that the edges aren't curling up. I want to have as flat a surface as possible. And I just want to see if my paint is able to come out at all. Okay, I'm able to get that coming out. So what I want to do now is use this to trace over my design and try and go kind of as smoothly as possible here. I've got some elements and I'm going to try and work from that corner down just so that I stand a chance of perhaps not putting my elbow into it. And of course I pick a pattern that has dots and things, and I want this to be a little thicker until it starts to thin out. So, you know, it's, as with all things, a little bit of practice to be able to get the movement of it. So we've got kind of a couple of stages of experimentation here. One is how easily we're able to get the image onto our paper. The second is whether or not we're able to get the image off the paper. So I am just going to kind of carry on trying to get this transferred on as smoothly as possible, perhaps, and then letting this dry. And while this is drying, I will paint at least one, possibly two coats of white onto that board so that I have that surface ready to go tomorrow for the next part of this. We'll see how it goes. One of those things that I'm thinking logically maybe it works, but again, I don't know about carrier paper, and maybe the shiny side was the better option. We'll see. I mean, if this doesn't work, that's what I would try next and take it from there. But if I was smart, I would just try a little piece and not the whole thing. But I'm invested in my pattern now. So I'm going to carry on, get this. I want to get enough paint on there so that there's something to release and to activate. But then we'll let this dry and we'll see tomorrow if we have any success. Keep our fingers crossed. All right, we have our board dried. I have our little faux inlay dried. What I want to do now is get my next coat of paint on, and I need this coat to be dry. So we're not doing it ahead. We need the inlay to be embedded into a wet surface. So whether it's, you know, paint or a top coat. Now this is an unsealed paint, which means there's no top coat in it, And just so you know, you handle the inlay differently if you're doing it into a paint with a top coat or into a top coat itself. You can't walk away and let it dry, but I'm going to be walking away and letting it dry. So, all right. Still needs a little bit of paint in a couple of spots here. So let's get this nice and wet. I'm not too worried about perfect coverage here because this is just a sample. This is just us playing. But I've got that paint wet, and now I have my mister. I want to take this and I want to lightly mist my inlay. Just the paint that's on there, I just want to have the opportunity to kind of activate it a little bit before I apply it onto my tray. We're laying it over top, and I'm going to push it down as evenly as possible onto the surface. I'm going to wet the surface so you can see it now come up in relief. I'm just gonna push it down again, and then I'm gonna leave this to dry thoroughly. I want it to become one with the white paint. And then we'll see how it goes. Okay, I'm thinking I may take my brayer if I can find it. There it is. And I might just give it a nice, gentle little nudge. And you don't want to do this too hard, or if you have too much paint, because then you push the paint and it oozes and it's going to smear your pattern. But all right, we're going to let this sit. We're going to let this dry thoroughly. Whether that's today or tomorrow, I don't know. It depends upon how my day is going. But this one, at least I can leave overnight if I need to. As it happens, this has had overnight to dry. So to release this, we want to spray it with water once again. We want to kind of reactivate that paint that's attached onto that paper. So we want to get it just kind of damp. I want to let it sit for about 30 seconds so the paint kind of softens a little bit before we start to try and remove the paper. In an ideal world, we'll remove the paper and it will leave my painted design behind. So let's give it a go. Oh, I made my paper too wet. So my paper's not lifting. Okay, I need to let this dry some. My paper's a little too wet for this, so it's not all lifting off. All right, let me see how it goes. And it's working. So we are definitely getting that paper lifting and leaving my design behind. So just go carefully, nice and slowly, and don't over wet your paper because it's just tracing paper and oops, you'll end up leaving your paper behind. So this is my little sample board, which turned out pretty darn good for the first time experiment. couple of things I would maybe consider doing a little different. Applying the paint, that was, once I got the hang of how much pressure, it worked out just fine in terms of details. And I deliberately picked something that was going to have curves, which would be tougher than straight lines, and some detailed areas. So I got better as I went along. As with all things, we gain skill with experience. I kind of approached it from the same idea of the Paint Inlays by IOD. And that was perhaps where I went wrong. This tracing paper is thinner than the carrier paper that IOD uses. And so spritzing with the water at the end, it was just more likely to tear. So it's definitely a wait until it's almost virtually dry kind of situation. You want to wet that paint, let that carrier sheet just almost be dry, and then it was peeling off just fine. So that was about the only difference between it. So, I mean, obviously it's a lot less work to purchase a Paint Inlay from IOD, but you are then limited to their colors or their patterns. With this method, you could do this with any color paint. You just have to make sure that you are using, I used DIY, which is a clay-based paint. You could use any chalk paint, any paint that does not have a built-in sealer, so that you're not sealing the paint to the paper, and that when you go to lay your carrier sheet down onto your wet surface, that paint will engage with that wet surface and become embedded into it. This kind of opens up a number of possibilities, and I think it was a fun experiment. I'm going to try it with some different papers. You just want something that's still going to be porous enough that you could wet it from the back so that it would release off of the carrier sheet. And that's the real reason that you still want to use kind of a porous page and not just a really solid piece of paper, is that we want the backing of it to ultimately release from the paint and leave the paint embedded. This worked out really quite well once I realized that I didn't want it to be too saturated. So definitely a little bit of learnings with this, but I gotta tell you, it worked out pretty darn good in making your own paint transfers. Let me know what you think of this one. Let me know if you're gonna give it a try and experiment with it. Let me know if you've even tried the inlays from IOD that I kind of used as the basis for trialing making my own. But again, it kind of opens up some possibilities, especially when I want to have maybe specific colors or specific designs. You could use this for signage as well, because as long as you've got the reverse image of your letters, then when you lay them down, they're going to be right side up, right way round. So you're okay even doing it for signs and things. Not bad if you're just kind of tracing around an image. Looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Looking forward to hearing what you think of this one too. And until then, take care.